Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Hello, my name is Alyce Phinney, and I am the Client Engagement Manager and a Private Wealth Advisor at Argent Bridge Advisors. Welcome to another edition of Coffee and Conversation. Joining me today is Eric Ashburn, Partner and Private Wealth Advisor at our firm Argent Bridge Advisors. We are a financial planning firm. We are a multi-family office based in Northern Virginia. We serve individuals and families through the U.S.
Hi, Alyce, and hi, everyone. Thank you for joining or listening. I'm glad to be contributing to the conversation today. I'll start off by saying a goal that we had as a firm in 2023, as it's coming to an end, was to share experiences, insights, and ideas for avoiding issues that may derail successful long-term planning, from too good to be true, offers to avoid, to family meetings about money. We intend to share stories, offer resources, and hopefully provide a springboard for your own meaningful money conversations and decisions. For the next 30 minutes or so, we plan to dive deeper into this quarter's topic, turkey, gravy, and financial conversations, where we'll share some ways to combat uncomfortable and unspoken financial conversations. This ranges from politics to death to caring for parents.
Yep. So thank you, Eric. Well, let's get started. As Eric mentioned, this quarter's topic is turkey, gravy, and financial conversations. And we're kind of just wondering, do you ever find yourself sitting around the Thanksgiving table discussing taboo topics with your family?
It's a great question. And to get started, I'm going to share, there'll only be two slides to share today. The first is a good overview of just what we'll be discussing. So, may or may not know, but there are two sides to money. And this training comes from one of my designations, Certified Financial Transitionist. And that is very much of the mindset that there are two sides of money. The technical side, which everyone is familiar with, that has to do with much of our financial planning work when it comes to minimizing taxes, managing, reviewing investments, estate planning, cash flow, risk management. But the topic today, and another important part of financial planning and my training as a financial transitionist, is the personal side of money, which has to do with the relationships, emotions, hopes and dreams, self-esteem, sense of well-being. And as the slide says, both are equally important, both are very complex, but the personal side is what drives decision making, and that's part of what we hope to get out of today, help lead you to some important decisions through conversation. And I will stop sharing if I can figure out how. Okay. And with that being said, Alyce, maybe you can share an example of the personal side, since I just gave some topic overviews.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Eric shared, we know that the personal side is the side that's driving these decisions, and comfort is a big personal driver. So when it's uncomfortable to talk about these certain subjects, then when it's comfortable to talk about these subjects, then it's easier to make these decisions. And when we're uncomfortable talking about something, then it's common to delay and hold off from making these decisions. So as advisors, we see this often. And a common example of this is for estate planning. So it's very uncomfortable to think about our own death. And because of that, we don't want to talk about it. It's easy to delay. We see this when individuals are planning, but we also see it with couples. We see that maybe possibly one of the spouses is ready to have that conversation, an open conversation about estate planning, and maybe the other spouse is kind of dragging their feet. And we always kind of start with, we love to ask questions to kind of just open the vault. And a big question to ask yourself is, why do you feel uncomfortable? Maybe it's uncomfortable to you, but it's not necessarily uncomfortable to the person that you're asking. Maybe you just assume that it's uncomfortable for them. So that was something to consider. asking yourself, why is it so uncomfortable will kind of help you, kind of open the gateway to this conversation and maybe change your approach. So is this what you're seeing, Eric? I mean, we kind of always talk about this as advisors.
Yeah, definitely. And as I'm sure everyone knows, some of it is a generations thing where the conversation is very different when it's parents trying to get insight about children, whether it's trying to teach them about investments from the earliest stage to adult children, just checking in to make sure they're okay and they're on track, to the other way around, parents checking in on parents, or children checking in on parents because maybe the adult child is concerned about mental capacity going forward, or concerned about what will happen if something happens to one of the parents. So in either case, the conversations can be difficult. So Alyce, why don't you give some ways to break the ice?
Well, everyone knows that I love a good story. So if it was me, I would suggest to start with a story, maybe even a disaster story. And I'll share one from my own family. This is a true story, and you are more than welcome to borrow it. I had an uncle who suddenly passed away at 61, and he left his estate to my two cousins. And sadly, one of my cousins passed away less than a year later when she was only 30. She was a newlywed, and she left everything of hers to her then husband. And they had only been married about 18 months. And, as family members, you're always thinking, was it my uncle's wishes that he left half of his estate, essentially went to this person who had only been married to his daughter for 18 months? Probably not, but we'll never know. And this is really a great example of why proper estate planning is so important, because this what if scenario, I can tell you, it never occurred to my uncle that he would have a daughter pass so young. And a trust would have been a great solution for this. Lots of times people think of trusts to prevent their children possibly from creditors or from divorce, but it's also about protecting assets in the case of premature death. So definitely something to using a story like that, and whether it's your, it's just really
I'm not sure if I'm the one that froze or if everyone else sees Alyce frozen right now. I'm going to give her 1 second to get back. Oh, and she dropped. So I'll just give her 1 second to get back, and then we'll pick up where we left off. I apologize, everyone. While she's getting back, let me just touch a little bit on the next topic. So she was discussing why the conversation about estate planning is so important, and she's completely right about that. But I'm going to give something else maybe that everyone should be thinking of, and that is, oh, and she's back, so I didn't even get to the topic. Alyce, are you with us? Sorry, you froze and then dropped off,
I
but
know, and I don't know how much was caught or not.
that's okay. We can move ahead. I think hopefully everybody got the main idea of the importance of a story, and you had an excellent example, and why estate planning is important. So I was just about to jump into what else people should be
I
doing.
don't know the part, I don't know it got cut off or not, but it was the part, did you get to hear the part about just kind of like how this is really important? It's a kind of a gift to the other partner.
No, but that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah. So I was just, and I apologize for my internet cutting out. Just really kind of just saying that, we think of this as a gift.
And she's frozen again. So I'm just gonna take it from here. So what else you can be doing is putting boundaries on what you're going to share with the person. So having the conversation beforehand with siblings is a great idea, so that you don't come across as trying to rush your way to an inheritance, or having conversations where other family doesn't feel included. Really including the whole family and having those boundaries will make a more productive conversation when you are ready to share. And along with that, be very clear with your intentions right from the start. Explain your why instead of telling your parents or children what to do. That doesn't come across well. And if the personal story isn't for you to get the conversation started, it could also be a great idea to lead with a news article or just talk about an example. It doesn't have to be a full story. Maybe that happened recently in the family that they'll be able to relate to and build some urgency around. The whole process can be overwhelming. So I think starting with the basics, such as a will, and limiting it to maybe one thing, the basics, will help with action going forward. Because if you just list everything at once or too many questions, it might be a little bit of paralysis by analysis of it's too much information and then nothing productive will happen. It's really about starting the conversation, keeping an open dialogue, and allowing the parent or child that you're speaking to and have concerns to maintain control. And looks like Alyce is joining again. Can you hear us?
I can, and
Nope.
I again apologize. I switched over to my hotspot, so I shouldn't have any problems moving forward.
Okay, we just want to keep it moving. I know everyone, we promised 30 minutes, so we'll keep moving on. I went over some of the lead-ins, and if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the tools at our firm to facilitate these conversations.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest tools that we use at Argent Bridge Advisors, and your advisor would certainly be open to having this, is really offering the family meeting. This is something that you could offer to your loved ones. It could be to your parents. It could be to your children. It could be even siblings or anyone who's going to be involved in your finances moving forward or your estate. So this really creates a safe space, and the advisor will act as a kind of a neutral party, really to open the dialogue. Again, we're trained to kind of ask certain questions that will, again, start this dialogue off. So really we want to encourage you to leverage your advisor. And I know that Eric, I know your designation, the certified financial transitionist, you went through a year of training to have this designation. Can you just kind of share some of the examples and like how your training has really helped to facilitate these conversations?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share one more slide. I promised only two, but this is important, and we go over as a certified financial transitionist. I know it looks basic, but it's a lot of what we're talking about today. All transitions have 4 stages. We're talking about the anticipation. So no action has happened yet. You're trying to do your best to prepare, have productive conversations, because once the anticipation is over and the event happens, it can be too late. It's set in stone. What's going to happen will happen at that point. Start to go into action, and the unknowns have to be figured out at that point. The passage is right after the event, when you're figuring out what are the possibilities, what happens next. There's a lot of chaos around it. There can be fear around it. If you're talking about having a conversation with your parents, for instance, and maybe one spouse handles all the finance and the other is in the dark, that's kind of something that we've seen. And then the spouse that handles everything passes away, whether expected or unexpected. And then comes the passage for the surviving spouse, where they feel like they have to figure everything out. And if they're in the dark and you're in the dark, as someone trying to help them, it can lead to a lot of confusion, delays, stress, especially on the surviving spouse to get it figured out and feeling like should have done more to understand what the other's wishes were. Um, this stage is difficult no matter what. Like when something happens, expected or not, it will be difficult. But anything you can prep in the anticipation stage will make this smoother, will make it not last as long, and will help all the others in the family, because we've seen some pretty big family tension. It caused health concerns. It completely strained relationships. We want to avoid that. And you're not going to solve all that in one Thanksgiving meal. But if you can raise the right questions, open the conversations, that will make the path smoother until you do reach the new normal and everything has been put in place and you're done with the transition. So let me stop sharing.
And one of the reasons why we kind of chose this topic, thinking that this would be a great one to kind of approach during the holidays, because you're probably with some of your family members for a couple of days on end. And this conversation isn't meant to just all happen in one dinner, but just to kind of start the conversation and then over the next couple of days, kind of revisit it and, get a sense of how the other person feels or the other party feels.
Yeah.
All right. So let's kind of turn to another taboo topic. This one is really more about parents. This is going to affect, almost everyone here, but aging parents. And how to care for your aging parents. Again, this is a taboo subject. It's really hard to think about your mortality or even your parents' mortality. This is uncomfortable for people to have conversation about. And I know that you love a good statistic, Eric. And I think that you pulled a couple for us. So if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yep, happy to. And to be clear, we're talking about long-term care. So that's different from long-term disability. That's often a question where it's confused. Where long-term disability is something you get through work typically, where it's if you can't work, you're still getting paid a certain amount, usually 60%. But long-term care, it's very often after you're working. Your employer may have coverage you can purchase separately. It's worth looking into, or we can go to the marketplace, look at carriers that offer it. But long-term care is when you can't perform multiple acts of daily living. So can't feed yourself, can't dress yourself, not mobile, these sorts of things. And it's becoming more and more common, even as people are living longer. I'm sure, unfortunately, most of the listeners, most of us can relate, can think of someone in their family that's been through this and needs care to varying degrees. But there are some alarming statistics as this does become more and more common, especially for women that are living longer than men and by themselves and need the extra help. So the Administration of Aging estimates 70% of people who are 65 today will require care at some point. So that is sick, and as you may or may not know, it's very expensive. So 61,000 a year was the median for cost of a home health aide, so someone coming in. And it's important to keep in mind that is the median nationwide, and it was in 2021. So if you're in the Northern Virginia area, it's much more than that. We've seen it be as much as double that. So it can be very expensive to have someone come in. And I know many have the attitude where a child, like, I'll help, I'll take care, but it can be a huge strain and time commitment. I mean, it can be around the clock care at times. And if it's skilled care, like someone to give medicine or take care of things that you may or may not have the training, it can be necessary. So that expense, it's unavoidable. And at least with a long-term care policy, you can mitigate some of that. The policy would cover a portion of that. And then it gets more expensive if someone needs to go into a nursing home or go into a home. 108,000 was the annual nursing home costs in 2021. And if you have the mindset, well, the parent, I will never go to a nursing home, you don't always have a choice if it gets to be the need is too great. 60% of assisted living residents moved into a skilled nursing facility just because they can't always get that same level of care at home. And if you do get the same level of care at home, it's going to be around the same cost, right? Like, so you still have to deal with the massive expense.
Yeah. So these are alarming amounts of money. We certainly don't have a crystal ball about what our needs are going to be as we age, but we can pretty much predict that the cost of healthcare is going to be one of the biggest expenses that you're going to have in your later years. So let's talk about the misconception of Medicare and how that plays into your costs. Medicare, it does not solely cover your healthcare costs. Additional healthcare insurance planning should definitely be a priority conversation because Medicare does not pay for long-term care. And that is, as I said, a definite misconception. Really an important question to ask your parents is, and Eric kind of already touched on this, like, do they have a plan in place? What do they have a long-term care policy? What are their wishes? Because most clients are going to tell us that they have a preference to age in place. And that what we mean by that is staying in your home as long as possible. That's typically what we hear from clients. And that absolutely can be done. And especially if you have a long-term care policy that will apply towards any in-home care as well. So long-term care policy is not meant, it can sometimes, depending on the policy, cover all the expenses, but in the policies that are written today, it's really, kind of meant to subsidize those expenses, whether you're in home or you're in skilled nursing. It's just so costly that it's hard to predict if it's going to cover everything. So you really want to weigh, again, what those financial wishes are, because you may have some financial wishes, but then there is the, ability to actually afford those wishes. And you want to make sure that that is a conversation that kind of goes hand in hand. So anyway, I will share, this is something that a lot of people are unaware of. So did you know that in the state of Virginia, support of parents by children states that each child over the age of 18 has a joint responsibility to provide assistance in the support and maintenance of their parents if they are in need. So that may come to a lot of you as a surprise. These are referred to as filial responsibility laws, and 30 states have filial responsibility laws in place. Many of the states do not enforce these, but we kind of think that as population increases and expenses increases, that you may have, an ability for people to be able to care for themselves. It's very possible that we're going to see more and more states enforce these. So there are many states that do currently enforce these laws, and the state of Pennsylvania is one of the most aggressive states that actually enforce them. So if everyone turns to Pennsylvania, you would think that your kids don't have any skin in the game, but in the end, they might. So again, this is, not just about protecting your parents, but it's also protecting yourself and knowing what your liability is. And that's just really a great example of where a family meeting could come, be really, really helpful to everyone. So what else do we have on the agenda, Eric? I know that we wanted to talk about whether to see if your children, well, let me pose this. What if your children or your parents either mismanage their finances or don't have the physical ability to manage their finances? What are your thoughts on this?
This is also a great topic, a relevant topic, because many have to see this themselves at a certain point. I think that it's helpful if you have parents that manage their finances themselves or through an advisor. It's important to them maybe to agree on trigger points. What I mean by that is, when would they be comfortable if you or a neutral third party started to get involved, started helping them to avoid potential fraud, to prevent mismanagement, to make sure their wishes were being followed? Is it at the loss of a spouse, we do X? Is it if there's a medical event? Is it a certain age? Getting that on paper written down, I think can be very helpful to come back to, and the timeline can always move up. But at least putting it in place, as I've said throughout this, a theme is get the conversation going. Start to have the conversation, I think can be very helpful for those parents that have an advisor. Maybe ask if you as the child can join in on a meeting when they're comfortable. And don't just do this without telling your spouses and the rest of your family who are trying to make sure everyone's on the same page. But if they're comfortable with it, that maybe could give you comfort. Maybe they have everything in place, they're good to go, and you just needed that communication. Maybe you go to a meeting and it's completely misaligned with what your parents has told you.
Eric, you just caught up for me, at least, and maybe for someone else as well, if you just want to repeat that one last part.
Yeah, sure. I was just saying that if your parent has an advisor, coming to the meeting could be helpful, just to make sure you're all on the same page. If they don't have an advisor, having the conversation of when would they be comfortable having the advisor, and if never, then what would they do in the event that they could no longer manage. At a bare minimum, they should start getting their spouse involved, so that if something happens to the main person managing the money, the other isn't left in the dark. So start, again, going back to those trigger points, I think can be helpful, and starting to open the door of asking the parents what their goals are, what are their legacy planning. You can help give them fulfillment if it's something you can help with, or at a bare minimum, start to get an understanding.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that's important to know is, what does the structure look like for one of these family meetings? I mean, you're in control, and to know that it's up to you what you want to share and what you don't want to share. And a lot of things can be shared without talking about dollar figures or anything like that. It's really just about, getting the other person, comfortable, because they may be managing this. And also, a lot of times people think of estate documents being just at the person's passing, but obviously there's a lot of estate documents, like a power of attorney, both financial and a medical one, that's for during your life as well. So the other people should certainly know who those people are. Like, if I had a responsibility to control something for my parents, I'd want to know that, it was going to be me that was going to be involved in that, as opposed to my sister, and what that responsibility, and am I willing to take that responsibility on? But most important, know that you're in control. A lot of times people come in and, they're just, it's an uncertain, like, what's the structure? You can have a conversation with your advisor before the meeting to say, like, this is what I want to discuss, and this is what I don't. Can you help me have a conversation with my parent or with my child about this particular topic? So,
okay, with that, we're at 30 minutes. We'll make this last part quick. And that is politics. When that will undoubtedly come up at the Thanksgiving table. Anything to add from the start about that, Alyce?
I would just say, don't mix alcohol with politics. So if you're going to have this conversation, even though we left it towards the end of our conversation today, I would probably, if you're going to go down this road, have the conversation in the beginning of the meal, just so that everybody is sober at that point still. So
yeah, and it's an emotional topic. A lot of the time, everybody has the family member that will bring up their feelings. So you might not have a choice of when the conversation is. But again, if the theme is productive conversation, everyone on the same page, my advice would be, when the topic is brought up, if it's something that's offensive or something needs to be said, of course, say something. Don't let that go unsaid. But if there's a way to de-escalate the conversation or turn it into a productive one, that could be a great move. So my advice for that is to, if someone comes with an extreme political opinion on either side, it's to go a layer deeper and see what they're talking about. So, for example, you have a relative at Thanksgiving that says uh, no one should have free college education. Like, that's a joke. You could say, I see you value how your tax dollars are being spent. What would be important for you to spend money on? So by that, you could learn um, maybe what else is important to them, and maybe it's something you agree with. Maybe it's something they need to address in their own estate plan. Or if they're talking about social issues, you can talk about how clearly you feel strongly about family or family values. That so you don't have to stick on a certain subject that you're clearly going to disagree with. You can speak more broadly or more productively. And when you are asking questions to gather insight to help the family member, I would say be careful with advice giving questions. Instead, stick with true questions or clarification questions. For instance, ask, have you tried X? Instead of, why haven't you done this? Because advice giving doesn't always come across well when you're asking questions like that, and can set someone on the defensive. So sticking with clarification questions, and for any action items, say my request is, or maybe frame it in a more delicate way instead of I need you. So try not to give direction, because remember, the other person is in control. You're just trying to be a resource, trying to help. So especially with some of these emotional topics, that would be my advice.
I love it. So with that, we're going to jump into our question Q&A. I see one that came up, which is it ever too early to purchase long-term care insurance? And the way I would approach that, there's so much planning that goes into when's the right time for you to purchase long-term care insurance. A lot of that has to do with taxes, like where is the money? How is this policy going to be paid for? So that's why planning, it's not something you typically just say, like, I'm going to buy it tomorrow. It's something that you're planning, because if the money that's going to pay for this is coming out of, let's say, an IRA, we want to make sure that we're planning over time for your income. It has to do with taxes. It has to do with cash flow. Obviously, the earlier that you purchase a policy, the policy has more time to, it doesn't have a cash value, but you can buy more for your money, because the insurance companies, it's all about statistics, and they're thinking, well, this person's not going to need this particular, skilled nursing or in-home care for, X amount of years out. And so depending on when you purchase it, it would grow. And then there is a grow value, which often is the COLA. So not every policy is sold with a cost of living adjustment, but the majority are, and that certainly is helpful. And know that if whatever's happening with our standard inflation, trust me, healthcare inflation is higher. So when we were back in the days when we were at, low inflation, healthcare was at 5.7% at the time. Do you want to take the last question, Eric?
Sure. If your parents or siblings won't engage in your attempts at a conversation, are there steps you can take on your own behind the scenes for someone else's benefit? As it stands right now, most states are not enforcing these laws. So A, it depends on your state. B, I would say that you can help yourself and help future issues the most by having the planning conversations with your parents, because maybe it's something they fund that comes from the inheritance. If it's something where they don't have the resources, maybe Medicaid is the plan. But you won't know any of this until you start having the conversation. But as things continue to change year by year, state by state, it's important to stay updated and have a plan that can be adjusted. But waiting too long can be very dangerous for a number of reasons.
Yeah, great. Well, I don't see any other questions in our Q&A. So I will just close this out by saying that if you are a client of Argent Bridge Advisors, remember that as a client, we want to extend our services as a resource to anyone in your life that's important to you. And if you're not already a client and want to connect with us, visit argentbridge.com to learn more about our firm and what it's like working with us. So that concludes our presentation and last coffee and conversation for 2023. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to keep the conversation going and hear your thoughts. So please reach out to us and have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.